Andrew, I received a handwritten letter from you, postmarked from the Falkland Islands, inviting me to this podcast session. So, one, that could have been an email. And two, what are you doing in the Falkland Islands?
Jason, it's a whale of a story, but in short, Seemingly Unrelated is now at war with Argentina and the United Kingdom.
What have you gotten me into? Hey there, party people. Welcome to another episode of Seemingly Unrelated. I'm one of your hosts, at least until I get fired. I am Jason Heat. I am a professional writer, director, producer, pro wrestling commentator, and creative.
And I'm Dr. Andrew Johnstone, PhD, not MD, a digital humanist, a historian, and I don't know, a passionate lover. Why not? That sounds good.
Every episode, we're going on a journey thanks to Mr. Professor Andrew Johnstone, as he has something that's in his brain that's just causing a little bit of an itch, and it has caused connections to be made that are seemingly unrelated but tie into much bigger themes. I never know where we're starting or where we're going, simply along for the ride. And we are about to go on what he said off air is a real corker, and I imagine that in the good old UK that means something, and I'm gonna learn what it is.
I am the kind of person who says corker unironically, that's for sure. Jason, what is your personal experience with Wales? The animal, not the country that's part of Great Britain. WHALE, Wales.
Star Trek 4 is the best Star Trek. It's the most fun.
It's the most fun. It's the most fun.
It's an even-numbered Star Trek. If you've never been a Star Trek movie fan, I don't know that this actually still holds up. For a long time, with the original series and with the early Next Generation movies, there was a fan theory that I think does hold up, that basically you can always watch the even Star Treks, and those are the good ones, and those are the ones that you'll enjoy, and that includes classics like The Wrath of Khan or First Contact, and of course, Star Trek 4, I think it's called The Voyage Home.
The Voyage Home.
And it's a whole story about how important saving the whales are in science fiction. It is environmental conservationism couched into science fiction with a lot of fun. And so that is my first relationship with whales.
That's great, because I probably the same for me. Like if I were to reach back, because so The Voyage Home is 84, I want to say 84 or 86, definitely around when we were born. We were very young, but definitely had it on VHS as a kid. It is directed by Leonard Nimoy, and as I understand it, the big thing was saving the whales, right? That was a huge thing in the 80s. We had to save the whales. But I want to start by answering what whales are, so we can understand what exactly we were saving them from. So,
do you want me to give my...
Yeah, what do you think a whale is?
It is a large category of marine mammals. They are some of the largest mammals in the world. They live under the water. They are very smart. They are very blubbered.
Excellent. They are indeed marine mammals, live in cold areas. They're either in the deep ocean, or they're in the North Atlantic, the North Pacific, and the Antarctic region. And as you pointed out, they have a shitload of what? To protect them from the cold. Blubber, baby. Blubber. That's like a big thing about whales. The blubber, interestingly enough, this is where my journey really began on whales, is not the same across whales. Like, different whales have different types of blubber that can be made up of sort of different compositions. So the highest concentration of wax esters in a blubber comes from the sperm whale, which has it produces spermaceti in its skull. Like it has like a gland effectively in its skull, brain, whatever, that produces spermaceti, which has this really high concentration of wax esters, which gives it a pearl-like color and a viscous consistency, which is why they're called sperm whales, because their blubber, when people cracked them open for the first time, they were like, oh, they're full of sperm. And it turns out it was not sperm, it was blubber.
I'm sorry, that's why they're called sperm whales?
That's why they're called sperm whales, Jason. Spermaceti.
It's officially the first thing that I really didn't fucking know today.
Yep. That is your fun whale fact, because
they just cracked them open and was like, this thing's filled with cum?
Yeah. Yeah. Everything we know about whales does not, unfortunately, come from like genuine scientific discovery, but rather from whale hunting. So like whale hunters were actually very influential in our understanding of whales, like naming the sperm whale, because we have, it turns out, as humans, been hunting whales potentially for as long as we have been hunting, near as anyone can tell. Obviously, you need humanity to spread to the colder regions. Like, there's not a lot of hunting of whale in the Sahara, for example. But as soon as humans hit like Northern Europe, Russia, Canada, Alaska, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, these places, we started hunting whales. And there's two main things we were hunting for. One of them was food. Now, Jason, have you ever eaten whale meat before?
I have not, but a mutual, very close friend of ours, the Alaskan explorer, has eaten whale and has spoken to me about it and given me the rundown. Has it's one of those situations for him where sometimes it's not appropriate not to eat what's offered to you.
Sure.
And so you smile and you chew it a lot, and you make
do your best. You do your best.
You do your best.
Yeah.
You are a respectful guest in the home of people who are feeding you. And then you think about the salmon that you have in your freezer that you'll eat later.
Exactly. No, I was talking to a native Greenlander not that long ago who grew up eating seal and whale because they're a native Greenlander. You can't grow a tomato, it's Greenland. And
I've heard that seal is better, though. That seal
is better, but they do describe whale as being one, chewy, and two, smelly.
Yes, and that for anyone who doesn't know, apparently seal meat is jet black. Jet black.
As far as I know, you are correct. But I looked it up, and there's a link in the show notes to an NBC News article from about 15 years ago, where in Japan they had a glut of whale meat on the shelves because Japan is one of the few nations that still actively engages in commercial whaling. We'll talk about that in a bit. But and the problem was nobody wants to eat it.
No.
Everyone's like, oh, it's awful. It's absolutely gross. Either way, the food is not why we have hunted whale for thousands of years, right? The blubber is why we have hunted whale for thousands of years, because you can make a lot of stuff out of it, especially spermaceti. That high concentration of wax esters makes spermaceti really, really good for candles, for example. Whale candles were super common in this country, in Britain, right up until the 1940s, like literally up until World War II. When the age of exploration, as we tend to call it, or the age of empire and colonization, depending on who you want to ask, got started, whale hunting went with it, because whale oil has been used in so many applications, not just candles and lamps, but also cosmetics. It's also been used to make explosives, the triglycerides that make up, right? Nitroglycerin, that's what TNT is made out of. The triglycerides in whale oil definitely been used for many decades to make dynamite, and not gunpowder, but like other explosives.
And now for something completely unrelated.
I come from the Chesapeake Bay. I had a crab mallet in my hand before I could hold a pencil, right? This is where we're from. But man, the crab here is bad because I've had good crab elsewhere. Listen, Pac Northwest has some great crab. Had some great crab, of course, in Japan. Had some great crab in Italy.
Stone crab down in Florida.
Stone crab. Yeah. There's lots of different types of crab. I don't know what the hell's going on with the British crab. It's like eating dental floss. It's awful. It's the stringiest string that's ever. And I've had it fresh, like gone to the docks, seen the trawl, the boats with the cage, like they're pulling it out, and I'm like, yes, cook that for me. And then it's like, no. I hope vegans are listening. So when the British start going out into the world and taking over things, they hit upon ripe whaling areas. As early as 1675, Anthony de la Roche discovered the South Georgia Islands. And then less than a century later, James Cook discovers. He lands on the South Shetland Islands. And one of the bigger bays in the South Shetland Islands is called Whalers Bay. So we know why these guys ended up in the South Georgia and the South Shetland Islands, because there were whales there. And for those of you who are not familiar, these islands are at the bottom of the globe. Like, these are the islands that come off of the Antarctic continent into the Atlantic Ocean. Deception Island is one of the islands in the South Shetland Islands. It's called Deception Island because it has this like little inlet. So it's a volcano, and it's a rimmed volcano. So like there's rocky mountainous region all around the outside of it. And then there's this tiny gap where you can get in to like what looks like a lagoon. And so if you approach from the wrong side of Deception Island, you think you can see that inlet. Like you're like, oh, there's the inlet, but you're just going to run into mountain. And now you have to go all the way around to the other side of the island because you approached from the wrong side. So that's why it's called Deception Island. And it was really, really popular for these whalers because Deception Island protects you from the winds. Tall mountains protect you from the winds. The fact that it's an active volcano means that the water in the lagoon is also like multiple degrees Celsius warmer than anywhere around the island. So it's like a weirdly, relatively, but like a relatively more comfortable, temperate island compared to, Antarctica, which is across the way. The harshest environment. And at the peak of whaling in the region, Britain controlled the islands, but they leased out Deception Island to Norway, to Norwegian whaling companies.
Who buys Deception Island? It's like a Nigerian prince scam it's like a Lex Luthor real estate grab. Like, yeah. Norway, would you like Deception Island? It's definitely a real island. It is absolutely of value. We'd also like to introduce you to Hoodwink Bay and, I don't know, Scam City.
So they lease it out to Norwegian whaling companies, not just Deception Island, but for the whaling rights to the South Shetlands for £20,000 a year in the Victorian period, which today would be something like £12 million a year. So roughly $20 million a year. A lot of money, if we're being honest, like for the right, just the leasing right to whale in the region.
But you got to kill a lot of whales to pay off that investment.
And if you look at some of the earliest photographs of Deception Island, well, the first ones have penguins in them, but most of the older ones have these photos of 13 factory ships, like 13 full-on steamboats or sailing boats.
Field helicarriers of the sea.
Exactly. Set up just flensing whales, which is the process of like taking the blubber out of whales.
Flensing,
yes.
That's another thing I've learned.
Not going to describe it to you. Nobody needs that in their life. Processing
Come on.
whale
Tell it
lover.
to me. Tell it to me in the most seductive way possible. Describe flensing as though it was you being the sensitive lover that you described yourself earlier in the show. Give me a little bit about the flens. Let's do an exercise. I've got my eyes closed. Walk me through it.
All right, so first of all,
whale candles are lit.
Oh God, Naomi, you cut all of this out.
Naomi, you keep this and you play some really just groovy, smooth jazz underneath. Help set the move. Get in the clear, and
you have to suspend the whale, and then you need to insert a knife. Starting below.
They do suspension in some cool bars in the Upper East Side. You know what I mean?
Because the principal product, as I said, was nitroglycerin. This peaked in the 1880s. It was a multi-million pound business. But that's why Britain maintained control over the South Georgia and South Shetland Islands until the 1930s, really straight up until the 1930s. But by 1936, all factory whaling in these islands shut down.
What timing? Really feel like they're like, well, we wouldn't possibly need any more nitroglycerine right here in the mid 1930s. Can't possibly have a reason we would. Oh, hello.
Well, interestingly enough, the reason why was because some serious shifts in chemistry had allowed for the creation of glycerin from plant-based products. So, like, very famously, a lot of fat substitutes were discovered at, like, the Tuskegee Institute by African-American scientists experimenting with soy.
This is mind-blowing to me because I always thought the pioneer of glycerin was Gavin Rossdale.
That is a 1990s music reference, I think. Glycerine, yes. Yeah. Don't let those days go by. It took me quite a long time to get around to remembering what the hell you were talking about.
The joke is always funnier when you explain it. So.
Yeah. That's my job. I explain things. You make jokes. I explain jokes. This is how this works.
That is basically the role distribution.
That is the role distribution. But yeah, we figured out how to make things out of soy. And of course, by the 1930s, petroleum production is much, much more efficient and cheaper.
Vaseline.
Yeah,
don't let those days go by.
I was thinking more crude oil, but yes, we make a lot of things out of petroleum. So there's just not, you don't need whale oil. You have alternatives, and all of those alternatives are, 1, cheaper, 2, more consistent. Like, whale prices can fluctuate based on, like, whale hunting, right? Like, hunting is not as predictable of a economic system as farming is. So in 1936, all of the whaling factories were shut down in the South Shetlands, and the administration of the South Georgia and South Shetland Islands was turned over to the Falkland Islands. The Falkland Islands is a collection of islands, like, right off the coast of Argentina.
I'm aware of the Falkland Islands simply because Good Mythical Morning does a where in the world do these international foods come from? And their joke is that the Falkland Islands are always an option that they can guess and are never where they come from.
Never where they come from. Yeah, I mean, listen, the one town on the Falkland Islands is called Stanley. If that doesn't give you an idea of how low interest the Falkland Islands are, but Port Stanley's function is literally for hundreds of years fueling depot fueling and restocking before you try to make the trip along between, again, Antarctica and South America. Like, you stop off at the Falklands if you're British, you fuel up, you get some food, and then you try to make the most dangerous boat journey in the world. Like, that's its whole point. That's why it exists. So that's how low tier the South Shetlands and the South Georgia Islands become in 1936. They become administrated by the Falklands directly. And as you've already alluded, Jason, something happens just right after 1936 that really shakes things up. What happened?
Well, I don't know if you've ever heard of the concept of a sequel, but when you have something as exciting, as monumental, a multi-year summer blockbuster like One World War, well, baby, you need an electric boogaloo.
You say World War II is the Avengers Endgame of society?
No, unfortunately, I think what I'm saying is that World War II is Age of Ultron.
Oh, no.
And we're still waiting for Endgame.
Wait, well, for
no, I don't.
Infinity War.
I was about to be like, I don't think Thanos has snapped yet, and I am not excited for the rapture, baby.
Excellent. But another seemingly unrelated, Hitler causes issues, which means that as we move into the 1940s, Britain is distracted, if you will. They're occupied with dealing with what's going on in Europe. And
is your takeaway going to be that World War II was good for the whales?
No,
that's going to be
we haven't even gotten to the seemingly unrelated yet. We've just gotten into what is up with whales.
We've just been hanging out at the Falkland Islands.
So with Britain dealing with Europe, they obviously don't commit much in terms of resources to these now defunct whaling islands. In fact, in 1939, the British Navy toured around, and by the British Navy, I mean like 2 boats, toured around the South Shetland and South Georgia Islands and just set alight anything they had there, like coal supplies, oil supplies, whatever was there, because they were literally like, we can't pay attention to this and we don't want either Nazis or Japanese to come down and scavenge these supplies. Like, we don't want to give anything to their war effort, but we know we don't have the material.
The bandwidth.
Yeah, we don't have the bandwidth to deal with these islands. So we're literally going to set everything on fire and leave. Which sets up a very interesting conflict. Because
do we get pirates?
If you look at a map, and we'll put a map up on the show notes to help people out, but if you look at a map, Britain is many thousands of miles away from the South Shetland Islands. But Chile and Argentina are hundreds of miles away. They're an order of magnitude closer. And World War II was a great opportunity for Argentina and Chile to step onto the world stage as something, right? They weren't directly involved in the war. Neither country declared war on anyone. But Argentina and Chile declare the South Shetland Islands, both of them, go, that's ours. Those islands are ours. In 1940 and 1941.
Okay, so separately or as a team?
They both do it separately. They both say, now Chile is going to fade into the background. Don't worry about Chile. Argentina's claim is a little bit more serious than Chile's claim. Argentina is looking at these islands and going, yes, we will control both sides of this pass. Now, the Panama Canal has been around for a few decades at this point, but there's still shipping lanes that go through this region. And if Argentina controls both sides, they can tax people for traveling through their waters.
And now for something completely unrelated.
Where I grew up, we would have, there was a highway, and you would get off the highway off these exits, and then to get off, there would be not quite a roundabout, but there would basically be a small plot of land that was basically just encircled by the off-ramp when you get off the highway. Yeah. So basically, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like
it's a cloverleaf design, basically.
A cloverleaf design. There was a center of land in the middle. And I always, when I was a kid, was like, what if I built a house on that land so that I could set up a toll booth so that anytime anybody got off the highway and passed my house, I could collect money for that,
Jason.
and I would live in that. And so basically, as a small child, I had the dreams of Argentina in the Falkland Islands. What if I just set up a house and
You
then set up a toll?
belong in this country, Jason, because I cannot tell you how many times I have gone over a bridge, like over a small river or brook or something, and a person has been standing outside in a high vis vest with a plastic tub and been like, toll, pay the toll. It's £2. And I've been like, this can't be real, right? And it turns out that, yes, the private citizen who owns the house next to that bridge has the legal right to charge a toll on that bridge. That happens in Britain every day.
It was my
It's
first.
weird.
I'm not particularly money motivated, but for some reason, as a child, I was always like, this is great. This would be a great grift. Like,
Yeah.
what if I just lived here and
If you could get like 50 cents out of each car, even 25 maybe. Ooh.
fuck my lemonade stand? Yeah, so Argentina has
takes
successfully
over
lived
this-
my dream.
Yeah, they basically put down some tents and like some shacks, some flagpoles with the Argentinian flag on it, and they're like, ours. And when word gets back to Winston Churchill, he's pissed. Like, you can read, and you can read the memos from like meetings and the correspondence. He is pissed. And I mean that both in the American sense of the word and in the British sense of the word, because that man was drunk every day of the war. So he's like, we got to do something about this. And the War Department is like, honey, Hitler. We are dealing with Hitler right now. Do you hear that rumble in the distance? That's London exploding above you right now. Like, we don't care about Argentina and the South Shetland Islands. We don't have time for this. But Winston Churchill, being Winston Churchill,
He's like Pepperidge Farms. He remembers.
he established, and I have this book, and I will put a picture up because you can see that I have got all of the little llama post-it notes where I've put I've marked all the pages and all the things. This is the main text for this episode, by the way. There's a few other links, but this one's really important.
Operation Tabarin, 1943 to 1945, and its postal history by Gary Pierce.
Gary Pierce. Yes, it turns out there is a resource that they can deploy to reassert their domination over this.
Is it the Postal Service?
So they put together Operation Tabarin, and it has 3 prongs, if you will. One of them is they are going to send a Navy ship, one Navy ship, down to the South Shetland Islands so that there is a military presence in the region.
Not to spoil this, but is this basically going to be like the ultimate version of a strongly worded letter?
Kind of, actually. Number 2, they're going to conduct scientific research into the fauna of the region in order to, just be like, hey, look, we're doing scientific research down here. We need to control these islands because we have to set up research stations. They also are investigating the viability of canning whale meat, which does start to happen. In 1944, because of Operation Tabarin, they do start canning whale meat. And whale meat in the can was on store shelves in Britain until 1955, which is exactly 1 year after rationing was done. Once war rationing was over, sales of whale meat fell through the floor. But while there was meat rationing, whale meat was not rationed. So you could have as much whale meat as you wanted, but nobody wanted it. Again, confirming whales are gross to eat. So whales still tied into this story. But the third goal of this was to build post offices on the various islands of the South Shetlands and South Georgia Islands and issue stamps from those islands in order to both, one, generate revenue to fund this expedition to the tune of 10,000 pounds a year. It did never made 10,000 pounds a year, but that was the proposal. And two, to establish permanent British holdings on these islands. Basically saying, no, Argentina. These are not your islands. Look at this postcard. It came from Deception Island. And this book is filled. I will see if I can get filled with stamps. I will try to do some scans and put them on the website, but I'll just link to it because I think the British Antarctic Survey has some links to it as well. They built post offices and they sent letters in order to say this is ours, or as we tend to call it in the modern day, mail fraud.
Yeah, that sounds
Mail fraud. The British Empire committed mass mail fraud from 1943 to 1947 in the South Shetland, South Georgia, South Sandwich, and Falkland Islands.
Just to get back islands that they didn't want in the first place.
Correct. That is correct, Jason. These are not useful to them at all. The whaling industry is done. This is just the British Empire.
I was gonna say, this just sounds like Churchill really needed a win, right? Like,
it's insane. I love this book.
He's going up against a top Division I team, and they're not doing great. So he's like, well, let's take on an intramural sports league so that we can feel good about ourselves as well. How did Argentina respond when their flag got kicked?
This is insane. Like, I think we might have a bonus episode of me just explaining Operation Tabarin in detail, but like literally the British show up in their boats and they just tear down there's no Argentinian people in these tents. They just tear down their tents, burn their flags, and raise like Union Jack, like British flags, and just go around the islands doing that while they're building like cabins that become post offices. And then the Argentinians would come back, find all their shit on fire and like a British flag, put the fire out, burn the British flag, raise the Argentinian flag for like 3 years.
Was no one operating the post office?
Well, that's the thing, is once a post office was established, Britain had a permanent presence in that they would have a like postman, and usually more than one. Usually, like,
I was about to be like, but the postman is not the like.
Yeah.
Usually,
so then,
the
like,
job description of the post office worker is not to like armed defense of the post office, because
yes.
the Argentinians send a military vessel, and suddenly it's a ship versus the postman.
Well, Argentina wouldn't want to risk war with Britain, especially in 1945. Like, now that they don't have the Nazis to deal with anymore, you're talking about it's effectively like the third or fourth largest military in the world. Like, you don't really want to mess with a 1945 Britain. You know what I mean? So, like,
they're hopped up on pre-workout and ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's going to be a veteran. Everyone's going to be a veteran of the worst shit ever, by the way. Like, they just went through World War II. Like, piss them off. Piss Britain off. See what happens.
Fuck with our post office.
Yeah. So,
can you imagine also the shittiest gig in the world is the person who's like, man, the South Shetland Island post office in 1946? Like, that sounds... Someone really drew the short straw on that one.
It's the most childish game of colonialism potentially ever played out.
I feel like you should make a board game called Colonialism. A la like
you could say make a board game called Operation Tabarin.
Well, no, I was gonna say I have a board game called Colonialism, so people could actually play a childish game of colonialism.
And yeah, the only thing that's potentially more insane than this back and forth is that it works. Like, Argentina never officially revokes their claim to the region, but they don't have the resources to build their own post offices as quickly as the British established their post offices. So, like, they just sort of kind of cede the territory for now. And the international community is like, oh yeah, they got a bunch of post offices over there. That means it's British territory. You wouldn't have a post office if it wasn't British territory.
The logic is
it's
sound, I suppose.
Airtight. So what used to be a bunch of floating whale factories is now a series of, post offices, I suppose. Like, they're huts, and they have postmen who live and work there who send mail, and the mail is usually like, here we are, daily report, everything's good. We now get to wind the clock forward to our true seemingly unrelated. You thought we'd already done it. You're like, yeah, whales in the postal service. This is seemingly unrelated. But it gets fucking weirder. So Argentina and Britain never settled this dispute. And then in 1976, Argentina undergoes a political disruption, shall we say. So the military junta takes over. There's a coup d'etat in Argentina.
Can you give me the one paragraph description
of the military junta?
Yeah, super layman's terms.
There were popular communist political parties in Argentina. The United States, under what's called Operation Condor, wanted to suppress those movements, and the military was happy to oblige. So from 1976, Argentina is under a military government, right? And then in 1981, that military government shifts in its leadership, specifically to two men, General Leopoldo Galtieri and Admiral Jorge Anaya. Part of the reason for that changeover is because, as was true in much of the world in the 1970s, Argentina had a rough economic decade. Like, the 70s sucked economically. And so out with the old, in with the new. And these guys are really interested in some kind of a victory that they can use to shore up support for their new military government, and also distract from the fact that they've been assisting the United States in the so-called dirty wars that we call Operation Condor. Like, they've been helping suppress communists across South America any way that they can. So that's what's happening on the Argentinian side of the equation in the late 1970s up until 1981. In the UK, the 1970s was bad also. Inflation was in the mid 20% range year after year throughout the entire decade. I think it peaked at 27%. And the conservative government in the early part of the decade tried like an austerity measure. It's called the 3-day work week. You think that sounds like a good idea. You're like, oh, a 3-day work week. But it was because they couldn't afford the electricity to run things. So actually you would come home and there just wouldn't be any electricity in your house because there were rolling blackouts across the country. And then the Labor government wins an election and they don't have any money to like fund their plans. And they take out a pretty substantial loan that like the British government's still paying off, I think. I can't remember, which is bad. So that's why in 1979, a new reformist candidate wins a minor, like not quite a majority, but they win the biggest percentage. And of course, that's Margaret Thatcher's conservative government. In the first 2 years, 1979 and 1981, under Margaret Thatcher's neoliberal policies, unemployment doubled in the United Kingdom, went from something in the neighborhood of like 3 to 4% unemployment all the way up to like 8.5%, 9%, more than doubles. Like nearly 1 million people unemployed under her watch. So Margaret Thatcher is searching around at this time for a distraction from what's going on in the world.
But that reminds me, and I was sort of making a joke earlier about that in the middle of World War II, that's also what Churchill was looking for in terms of the Argentinian thing, like, right? Like, this isn't going great, so here's a distraction.
No. That was because that's not until 1943. By that time, he's not winning the war, but by 1943, there was a lot more light at the end of the tunnel. That is literally just Churchill being like, that's ours. You can't have it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. No, we've got an Argentinian government who could use a nice distraction, and we've got a British government who could use a nice distraction, which is why on April 2nd, 1982, Argentina invaded the Falklands and the South Georgia Islands, thus triggering what is now known as the Falklands War. The British only had one, ship, basically, one Navy ship in the region, the HMS Endurance, and it left the South Georgia Islands a day or two before because they knew that, there was an impending invasion of the Falklands, so they're like, shit, we need to go defend the Falklands, but, it leaves the South Georgia Islands, and then Argentina is able to take the South Georgia Islands because it's one boat left to go defend the Falklands. So all of the research stations...
HMS, there's something here. There's something here. We can't let
HMS
this go.
Finish too soon? The HMS Premature...
More like the HMS Impotence.
Please leave that in, Naomi. Please leave it in. Let that joke fall as flat to the audience as it did here. The only joy I take out of it is the silence.
That's what impotence is, right? Falling flat.
There you go. Recovery.
Anyway, the point is the boat didn't live up to its namesake.
It did not live up. It did not endure. It left prematurely. The research stations and everything, which again used to be whaling stations, were taken over by about 12:30 in the afternoon, 3 or 4 hours after the invasion started. It was pretty quick. We're not going to get too into the details of the Falklands War. We'll probably save that for another episode. Feel free, everyone, to look at either the links I put in the show notes, or just read the Wikipedia article. Honestly, it'll give you the details you need on the Falklands War. But the British response was aggressive. They sent 2 aircraft carriers and 3 nuclear submarines, and they recaptured the South Georgia Islands on April 25th in Operation Parakeet. But it's not spelled like the bird. It's spelled Paraquet because they didn't know how to spell parakeet, which is spelled with a K.
Why did they call it Operation Parakeet?
I don't know. I tried to find out and I didn't get it. I think someone on the team liked parrot. They sent a lot. So by the 25th, so 23 days later, which is about as long as it took for the Navy to show up, they retake the South Georgia Islands, Operation Parakeet, and then by June 14th, 10 weeks after the war started, Argentina surrenders. 900.
So there's no chance that Argentina. This is what I don't get. That Argentina wants a distraction.
Yeah,
but the distraction is meant to be one of victory, right? It's meant to be an opportunity to showcase that we can be a mighty power, that we are independent. Look at the ability for us as a government to stand up. We're not just pawns of the capitalist system, etc. This is a failure, I would assume. This is a pretty big,
horrible failure. There's a real miscalculation on the.
Why the fuck did they think they should go to war with Britain for the big win? Right? It's a pretty big L. There's got to be places that could have been a W. It seems counterproductive.
If you look at it, though, it seemed like a soft target. Because, again, there's been no whaling. Whaling has basically been done since 1936. I
did think we were going to talk more about whales.
We will come back to that, actually, in a second. But it's mostly been done since 1936. And, we'll get to the last note for whales when we get there. But, since 1961, all that's been happening in these islands has been sheep herding in the Falklands and scientific research in the South Georgia Islands. They have one Navy ship defending the whole region. That's
So it's
it.
just basically a deep underestimation of the extent to which the Britain likes to have their stuff.
They really thought that what would happen is they would flashbang, blitzkrieg, take over the islands, and then sue for peace. And they thought that Britain would roll over. And what they didn't realize was Margaret Thatcher is crazy. She's an Iron Lady, my friend. This is where she gets the nickname from.
I mean, you could say a lot of things about Margaret Thatcher, and I don't know nearly as much about her as many do, but she ain't a lady to fuck with.
Right. Like, this is where the Iron Lady comes from, because she was like, absolutely not. There's not a chance in hell we're going to let this aggression stand. 2 aircraft carriers, there's only like 20 in the world. Like, they came hard at Argentina, and Argentina was not ready. They were like, holy shit. 907 people did die in the war, which is not great. Most deaths were on the Argentinian side. But its impact, it turns out, was really significant to the world we live in today. So in the lead up to 1982, so this all happens in April, May, June 1982. In January of 1982, the British press, the British public, was in general agreement that the Conservatives had to go. Like, there's an election in 1984 scheduled, and they were going to lose. And the 2 choices were either the Labour Party, the traditional, if you want to compare it in American terms, the Conservatives are the Republicans, or the Tories also, the Conservatives are called. They're right wing. Obviously, they're called Conservatives. And Labor are the Democrats. They're the leftist party. Well, Labor is like the Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. And that was one option. And then the other option was this coalition group made up of the Social Democrats, which was like a bunch of Labor people who split off, who thought that Labor had gone too far left and they wanted to bring Labor towards the center, and the Liberals, who are the center. Today, that coalition is called the Liberal Democrats, and they are the center party. So there's a right party, a left party, and a center party in Great Britain on the national stage.
Boy.
Oh yeah, you sound excited because you only have 2 options, and one of them is right wing, and the other one is the Republicans, which is a really tough choice.
I would personally love for the Republican Party to split.
It could, but that's a different podcast episode. So in 1982, the debate is who's going to beat the Conservatives to death in 1984. Is it going to be the center, the Liberals, or is it going to be the left, Labor, which like its candidate, like its main, like the leader of the party was like a real left-wing guy, who Michael Foot was his name, who is like a nerd. He's such a nerd, which that's just not going to play into his favor. And then the Falklands happens, and everything changes. So this, again, they start calling her the Iron Lady. And so quickly does this squabble over some old whaling islands propel the conservative government, specifically Margaret Thatcher. So like this, it's rare before Margaret Thatcher for the prime minister's personality to be so important in the British election. But she's so staunch in her, like, we got to take back the Falklands and the South Georgia Islands, that her personal popularity, like, takes the Conservative Party into the stratosphere of popularity. And she called an early election. So the election wasn't until 1984, but so popular is her response to the Falklands in 1982, she calls an early election in 1983, and the Conservatives won the most decisive victory since 1945.
In pro wrestling, we call that running with a hot hand.
Exactly. Yeah. Good point.
I mean, but like legitimately, I joke about this a lot, but it's also very true. The pro wrestlingization of politics has been something that has always been present, but I think is more and more the case rather than actually the doing of the job and the policy. It is about the casting yourself as the face, or people love being the heel, stoking that popularity, the branding. I mean, the Iron Lady does sound like something that you would.
Sounds like the Iron Sheik. Like,
yeah, no, but I mean, like introducing now, making her way to the ring, the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher. Personality.
Yeah.
Have a personality. I think that branding is incredibly important. That's really, I think that has been a part of the Americanization of the American political system for a long fucking time. And if I don't know enough about it, but if you're saying this is a big part of when it enters the British sphere, it makes a lot of sense. And it does become cult of personality style leadership. And that's a big part of our system these days. And it's a big part of the world that I operate in. So that branding plus conflict, I mean, it's very, very rare that very, very rare that a wartime leader is democratically deposed.
Yeah. It is in part, I think, a recency bias also factors in, but like no coincidence that when you poll the British public to name like 5 prime ministers, aside from Churchill,
yes,
they're all since Maggie. So it'll be Margaret Thatcher, it'll be Tony Blair, it'll be David Cameron, it'll be Boris Johnson, or maybe some other names might make it in. But like, yeah, the party gets kicked off because of the Falklands War. Because you're right, it gave her a great nickname that she could turn into a nice face story, a nice hero story.
A brand. I mean, it's a brand.
Yeah, it's a brand. And like, because, you know, the 1983 Conservative campaign was called Forward. That was like their slogan, Forward, which is like forward. Fun fact, like forward in Italian is like Avanti, which was the name of the first newspaper published by Benito Mussolini. And he used to say that in speeches all the time. He'd be like, Avanti, forward.
Well, I mean, languages, having a good slogan, a catchphrase is incredibly important. I'm not saying it's the only reason, by far not the only reason that Trump beat Hillary Clinton in the election. But if you go back and I mentally try and remember what the slogans for that campaign were, I 100%, even though at this point it's now a rage-inducing rallying cry for me, make America great again. MAGA is literally a brand. And if you paid me money to tell you what Hillary Clinton's slogan was, all I can remember is my friend saying, she's like the most competent or most credentialed person to ever, like, it was not it's not an emotionally compelling.
You don't remember the Hillary Clinton campaign slogan? Because I'm going to tell you, because it was terrible.
I have no idea what Hillary Clinton's campaign slogan was.
Love trumps hate.
Was that really? That was actually the slogan?
That was the slogan, love.
I mean, that's
Trump's
the thing. What sucks about that on so many levels is you've officially made the competition, which I hate. First off, this is really unrelated, but we should go. The fact that politics is now about purely sport, winning or losing, as opposed to an analysis of who can do the best job at the job, that it's not a public job interview. It is a sports situation. And all that matters is the winning and the losing, and not about the potential for an effective job, whatever that means, really is a devastating thing personally. But if you're framing this purely in the pro wrestling nature of it and who you're going to get to root for, love trumps hate is entirely about Trump. It now makes him the central character in both stories, and he has an aspirational, even if in reality it is bullshit, and his version of Make America Great Again is actually reductive and racist and obstructionist and going back into the past and all sorts of stuff. On the surface, it sounds like it's a very active, aspirational, very much like the Obama Yes We Can, though it's speaking to people who are like, I didn't like where we could. Love trumps hate is entirely framing it as a pun. It's clever. It's clever, but it's not emotionally responsive. It's not about you. It's not aspirational.
With the conservative victory in 1983, again, landslide, biggest victory since 1945, neoliberal politics has been at the forefront of Britain since 1983. It's no mistake that when Labour does get reelected, it's under quote unquote new Labour, which is Tony Blair, and it is specifically a Labour Party which is pitching towards not the right, but like right down the center. Like it's a Labour Party which is like basically our economic policies are very similar to the Conservative Party, but we don't like hate gay people or anything along the,
Well,
like
it's just like you were making the same point here. It's the idea that when one group so far in a different direction, it recontextualizes what the quote unquote center is. We're just able to adapt to almost anything, right? Like we are survivors, which does mean that we tend to eventually just sort of live within a context.
Yeah.
And then just adapt to that context instead of questioning whether or not that context is the best one for which we should live in.
Right. Which is not something that could be said of Wales, because by the early 1980s,
what a fucking segue.
I know, whale populations were absolutely minuscule. And there had been a campaign since the 1950s, like Greenpeace is by and large attributed with its Stop the Whaling campaign, Save the Whales. But interestingly enough, 1983 is when the International Whaling Commission, which is headquartered in Cambridge in the United Kingdom, really puts together the official wording of a ban on commercial whaling, which is signed into law by Margaret Thatcher in 1986, amongst others. So it is only with the end of the Falklands conflict and the final settling that these are British islands, which they still are. Falkland and South Georgia Islands are part of what are they part of? It's not the United Kingdom, but it's a part of the territorial control of the United Kingdom. Don't get me started on the difference between Great Britain, United Kingdom, and the Commonwealth of Nations, but it's a part of Britain still. And once that is settled, that is only when whaling officially becomes illegal in pretty much the entire world except Norway, Iceland, and Japan, where they are still whaling to this day. And of course, the United States and Canada, there's whaling, but it's not commercial whaling. Yeah. Like Inuit people, sure, whale, but like the process of like collecting the oil and all of those things, very, very limited to this day. So it's an interesting thing to think that whales, the animal, sets off this chain of events in the South Shetlands and South Georgia Islands that eventually gives us Margaret Thatcher as the Iron Lady, and only then does the process of commercial whaling come to an end.
So your thesis is that whaling led to a fundamental shift in the British political system towards personality-driven politics that has basically completely rechanged, maybe somewhat to the detriment, how politics works in your country.
Brit, yes, accurate. It is, by and large, how we get to the rise of neoliberalism. And as you said, personality-driven politics. It's not the only cause, of course not. These are all complex issues, but whaling and its prevalence on these islands sets up the conflict that brings us this first past the post kind of big personality-driven politics today.
So as we're starting to wrap up, and before I get to my things that I've learned, what is your big takeaway out of all of this?
I think especially here in Britain, the Falklands War kind of looms rather large in like the imagination of a certain generation. Like I remember talking to someone when I first was like first couple of years I lived here, and there was a coworker who had been alive at the time, and I said, the Falkland Islands? Why would you go to war over the Falkland Islands? Like, it's like, look at its proximity to Argentina. Why wouldn't you just cede that territory? And he was like, well, you should ask the people of the Falklands what they want. And like, sure. Like, if you poll the people of the Falkland Islands, the majority of them want to be a part of Britain. But we're talking about like 10 people on a fucking sheep island in the middle of the South Atlantic. Like, this is nowhere for nothing. It is some post offices that, by the way, are still run, but like as part of like to fund scientific research. So like that's kind of okay, cool. But like 900 people died in a war which reshaped the British political system over nothing, over islands that are not natively inhabitable, and which they had a capture the flag battle for 4 years. It's absolutely ridiculous.
So things I've learned today. First off, I always wondered if the sperm whale had to do with sperm in some way, shape, or form, because of course, why not? Never in my mind did I for them ever think that somebody, as you put it, cracked one open, looked inside, said, that looks like a crazy night I once had, and decided to call it the sperm whale. Two, boy, I had no idea that all I needed to do to cement my claim on any landmass in the world that I wanted is simply to set up a post office. I mean, the power. They say in the US, for example, like no sleet, no snow, nothing will stop the US Postal Service. And it just really showcases how important mail is on an international level. And as always, it's a thing that I've thought about before, but just the incredible importance and relationship between pro wrestling and politics in terms of branding and slogans, and how speaking to people emotionally can completely change the course of a narrative, knowing when to play that hot hand. But just the idea of someone who's deeply unpopular, but you give them a clear big win, right? Put them over somebody, and you give them a nice push, and you give them a catchy nickname, and you give them a branding for people to get behind, and suddenly it completely changes the nature of things. It's so interesting to me too. I really thought we were going to, and this was going to be an episode about environmental conservation.
Yeah.
I truly thought that we were going
related. That's not seemingly unrelated.
Yeah.
That's fair. If you, by the way, want to physically get into the muck and the mire, the British Antarctic Survey is hiring people to go down and live for a season and work at the still functioning post office at Port Lockroy in the South Shetland Islands. Oh man. So you can,
if here's the thing, if you apply for that job,
me or the listener,
so I'm saying, if you apply for that job, if you get it, you get free merch for life from us.
Sure.
Just 100%. If you become the post office worker at that job, send us your information. If you do apply for that job and send us a copy of your application, we will do a drawing, and one person will receive our very first t-shirt for free.
That's a great idea. I agree to that. Absolutely. You're welcome, British Antarctic Survey. We're going to get you tens of potential applicants.
We just really want a listener.
That'd be great.
On Deception Island. So
Deception Island, yeah.
Well, I think we are starting to wrap up this journey that took us all around the world, through Wales to post office to professional wrestling, as so many things often do. If you are interested in hearing my voice in a very different context, I have had, it's somewhere in a liminal space in between, another podcast called Collected Possibilities, which is an existential exploration to carnivals, fairs, festivals, amusements, arcades, and attractions. It's currently on hiatus, but a second season may well be in the works. And either way, there's an archive for you to explore, and that is available wherever you get your podcasts. Collected Possibilities. Andrew?
Yes, if you want to find me, you should keep listening to this show and maybe go check out our stuff on Instagram. You know, there'll be a plug at the end. It'll give you all the details. We pre-recorded that. But that's the best place to reach me for now until something changes, which I'll let you know.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this week's journey. Cannot wait to see where we fly to next. So long, party people.
Bye-bye. Seemingly Unrelated is a Life's Little Murder Boards production. Created and hosted by Andrew Johnstone and Jason Howard. Audio production and editing services provided by Naomi Code. Our artwork is by Megan Zemet. The theme song is Irizumi by Pistol Jazz. To find out more about everyone involved and access the show notes for this episode, visit us at seeminglyunrelatedpod.com.